Well, hello, Project. It's so good to be with you tonight. As Jeff said, I used to run the project, and as my wife and I were driving up here tonight, we're like, man, it's been like 8 years since we've been here, and I'm just really excited to be with you tonight. Jeff asked me to talk about marriage, and so I'm going to shoot on that for you tonight and see how that lands with you. But I want to tell you something, okay? So as I lead this church, every Sunday morning, I meet with a prayer team, and you got to know this. Every Sunday morning, a prayer team gathers to pray for you. And they're saying, hey, God, we want you to do something in the lives of young adults. We want you to move in their hearts. We want you to just, make them passionate about you. And so I want you to know that every Sunday I'm gathering with people praying for and over you. And it's just a joy and a privilege to do that. Now, I'm going to talk to you about marriage, but I'm going to talk to you about something absolutely crazy that happened to me 2 weekends ago. I was flying back from Toronto to Edmonton, and as I got on my flight, I was close to the back, and I'm the first seat in the aisle, and there's 3 seats to the window. There's a dude next to me, it was Super Bowl Sunday, who was wearing a jersey, hat on, kind of gruffy, and, just my age-ish looked like. And then there was a younger young adult woman beside him, I'd guess probably close to 30, and she was a good-looking girl. And so we're sitting there, no one knew anyone. And as the flight starts, the two beside me start really talking, okay? And they're like introducing themselves to each other, having conversation. I put my AirPods in and I'm listening to a podcast, but when you're on a plane, you have to talk loud because of the noise. So I'm catching everything in this conversation, all right? And so they start talking, and I hear that the guy's divorced, he's living with a woman, and they have 5 kids. And she says, hey, I have no one. I'm a free-spirited woman, and I live life in the moment. And I was kind of like, okay, this will give you an interesting flight right now, right? And so as the flight continues, the stewardess or the flight attendant comes by and she's like, hey, can I get anyone a drink? And they order 2 gins and a ginger ale, the guy does. And then she's like, oh, that's my favorite drink. I'll have the same. And I'm thinking, come on, man, really? Really? And anyways, so they get the drinks and they keep talking and they're getting friendlier and friendlier. And I'm like, this is crazy. Like they just met. Flight attendant comes by again. Hey, I'll order the same drink again. She's like, yeah, I'll have the same. Drinks come. They keep chatting. They're getting friendlier. And all of a sudden, okay, true story, I'm sitting there looking straight ahead, and I'm like, what's going on? All of a sudden, the guy's like rubbing her thigh like this, all right? And I'm like, oh, man, this is getting awkward because I'm sitting next to them, okay? And so then that stops, and then she grabs his hand, and she's doing this, all right, in his hand. I'm like, this is insane. Like, you guys just met, right? And so the flight attendant comes by again. And they're like, hey, we'll have one more round of drinks. And I'm like, man, okay, here we go. Next round of drinks come, and they're getting chummier and chummier. And as they got the 3rd round, the flight attendant says, okay, that's it for you guys. No more drinks. They're like, oh, they're all bugged. They look at me and they're like, who's she to write us off and all this? And I'm like, man, it's the rules, right? Like, I was pretty unimpressed at that point anyway. But so we're sitting there, and they're like, hey, you know how we can get more drinks? How about you pretend to propose to me the next time she walks by, and then we'll ask for champagne? And I'm like, is this like for real happening? Like I'm not making this up, okay? So she gives him a ring. They wait for the flight attendant to come up the aisle. And as she comes, he's like, will you marry me? And she's like, oh, yes. And I'm like, this is crazy. And she's like, they're hugging each other. She's like, did I really see what just happened? Oh, my goodness. They're like, yes, we need champagne, right? And I'm like, okay. And off she goes. And then I'm sitting there, and I notice like something going on beside me. So I look. This is crazy. They are full on making out, okay? On the flight. And I'm like, okay, I'm peace out. I was done at that point. I stood up, went to the bathroom. I'm like, I got to find a new seat because this is awkward, right? So I come back. The woman is sprawled out across the 3 chairs. Her legs are in my chair, and they're still making out, okay? So I grab my backpack, and I'm like, forget this. I walk to the back of the plane, I sit down, and then I see the stewardess walking up with like this tray, big heart towel, 2 champagne glasses, a bottle of champagne, and you bet I intercepted her. I said, don't do it. These people are totally playing with you. This is not legit. And so she went away and didn't give them the drinks. Here's the thing. The guy's walking back to me. I guess he went to the bathroom at one point, and he looks at me and he says, I just met her. Isn't that awesome? And I was like, no. That's about all I said. So you know those stories about pastors who get people saved on planes? Yeah, I'm the pastor who people make out beside. Like, seriously, it's just crazy. I've never experienced anything like that. And I thought about it. I'm like, that's like a prime example of what has happened in our culture. Like, we have cheapened marriage to the point of, hey, let's pretend to get married just so we can get a few extra drinks here. What's your thoughts on marriage? Do you plan on getting married? If so, have you ever thought about what you want in a spouse? So tonight, what I want to do before we get to this panel, I want to give you some thoughts on marriage and relationships, and I want to talk to you a little bit about that. And then my wife Marla is going to join us, and a really awesome couple from our church, Carlos and Kennedy, is going to be up here as well for a little bit of Q&A with Jeff and this panel afterwards. But I know this. For a lot of you, marriage can be a little bit scary. I get it. Marriage can make you a little bit nervous. But marriage can also seem like this exciting possibility that you want and that you can't wait for in your life. And I think a lot of us want to get married because at the end of the day, we just want to be happy. We want to spend our lives with someone else. Remember a number of years ago now, I read a quote in a book by an author called Gary Thomas. He writes a lot about marriage. And he said this, what if God designed marriage to make us holy even more than to make us happy? I just want you to think about that for a moment, okay? That statement, because I'm going to unpack some of that for you. You know, neurologists say that most marriages, there's this infatuation stage that lasts somewhere between 24 and 36 months. And then after it just kind of fades, and you start living what they would say is normal life. And the thing about that is, you know, we love the high of being married to someone, but when normal life kind of falls into play and starts happening day after day, you know what a lot of people start doing? They start to question, oh man, did I marry the right person? Like, I'm not feeling that anymore. And I say this, we feel that way, we go there because we have the wrong view of marriage. What we do is we actually set up our spouse as an idol. And when they can't be the God we want them to be, then we start to ask questions. Then we actually start to resent them a little bit. And Scripture says this in Genesis, first book of the Bible, 2 verse 24. It says, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they will become one flesh. One flesh meaning together. So you're no longer living for just yourself. You're living for someone else. And I get it. Romantically, that sounds awesome. Sexually, that sounds amazing. But what does it mean practically? What do you look for in a spouse? I guarantee you've thought about it. At your age, you should have thought about it. This past week, in fact, you guys were asked on your Project Instagram account the same question. I want to give you some of the responses that some of you gave in of what you look for in a spouse. And by the way, these were great responses, and thanks for engaging with this. Somebody said, I need someone that loves God more than he loves me. I'm like, yeah, girl, that's legit. That's awesome. I need someone that treats their friends and family well. That's a great filter. That's smart. I'll say this. Watch how the guy treats his mom, and watch how the girl treats her dad. I need someone with empathy and understanding. I need someone with patience. This is a good one. I need someone who eats as much food as I do. Nice. I need someone with ambition. That's huge. So I have 2 daughters. One's going to start coming here. She's graduating high school this year. That shows you my age here, okay? I'm stoked to have the project for her. Got another one who's in grade 9. And I tell them, when you're looking for someone to date or to marry, there's 3 things that got to line up. Number 1, they got to love Jesus passionately. Like, passionately. Number 2, he's got to respect you. And number 3, he can't be lazy. That goes along with the whole, there must be ambition there. Someone else said, I want someone that wants me. I want someone with loyalty. I want someone to laugh with. And somebody said, I want someone to love the Lord, but they got to be sexy. There you go. That's great. They got to be sexy. There. It's awesome. See, we all have these ideals of the perfect person or what we want in someone else. And these ideals, they ultimately set us up for what we're looking for in marriage. Now, here's something. I don't know anyone who doesn't love seeing an older couple that's married and still in love. It inspires us, right? And it's because I think we live in this world where almost everything else falls apart. And a relationship like that, the older couple in love holding hands when they're like mid-70s and kind of all over each other, it seems so opposite to everything in the world, right? It's not dying, it's not regressing, it's not losing life, it's gaining momentum, it's getting better, and it's bringing life. And maybe that older couple understands something about marriage that you don't. Because I think we all want to be that couple. But how do we get there? How do we make that a reality? Let me take you back to Genesis 2:24 again. Okay? It says this, a man will leave his father and a mother and be united to his wife, and they will become one flesh. I read that to you earlier. And for most of us, I think we just equate that to mean, great, they're going to have sex. And yeah, that's part of it. But there is something more here, okay? The word one in Hebrew, and I say it in Hebrew because that's the original language it was written in. The word one in Hebrew is a word called echad, okay? And that same word echad is found in one of the most holy Hebrew prayers that Jewish people actually still recite today. And that prayer is found in an Old Testament book called Deuteronomy, and it says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. The Lord your God is echad." And so what this is saying in Genesis is that a married couple are one just like God is one. So that marriage, one flesh, having sex, it's about something much bigger than the relationship itself. It points beyond them to somebody else, and namely, it points to God. I mean, there's no doubt, you just got to look around and you can see that our world is pretty broken. So many things keep falling apart. There's broken homes, there's affairs, there's pornography issues, there's divorce. Broken is everywhere. And a marriage, you know what it's designed to do? It's designed to counter all this. Not to add to the brokenness, but to add to the oneness in the world. In the Christian worldview, it's this man and woman who have committed themselves to each other, and they're meant to give the world a glimpse of hope, a glimpse of what God is like, a glimpse of echad. That's why we melt when we see these older couples who are still in love. It's kind of us looking through a window and saying, man, that's essentially what I want. That's essentially what I want and go after in my life. That's what we were made for. And I think what that older couple would tell you is that takes a lot of work to get there. To be that couple that everyone wants to be, takes effort, it takes drive, it takes motivation, it takes laying down of self, it takes prayer, it takes surrender. You know, I remember one time, hearing about an interview on Oprah, and she was interviewing Jenny McCarthy, who used to be married to Jim Carrey. And you know those names, I'm sure you do. And Oprah asked her, hey, when did you know your marriage was over? You know what she said? She said, when it's not fun anymore. When it's not fun anymore? That makes no sense. Okay, young adults, listen to me. That's a selfish answer. It's an answer built on, hey, what can I get out of this relationship? Not what can I do to make this what I want it to be and what this relationship needs to be. Because in marriage, you can't just think about what's best for you. You must and you should put your spouse before anything else. That's key. That's why we say marriage is designed to make us holy, not just happy. Because holy means we're going to have to die to ourselves. We're going to have to live for someone else. And I want to tell you, nothing replaces the fight for longevity in marriage. Nothing replaces the effort that you put into a marriage. Nothing replaces the wins of dying to self. Because that's when you can see yourself years down the road having gone through some major stuff and believing, hey, you know what? This relationship, this marriage, it's actually the really best thing that could have happened to me. This really is Echad, one flesh. My wife and I, Marla, this is our 23rd year of marriage. And I can honestly tell you that everything I'm talking about here is absolutely true. For us, in 23 years, communication is better. Understanding of each other is better. Sex is better. Playing to our strengths and weaknesses is better. Realistic expectations is better. Learning to die to self is better. You know, marriage is a call to listen to what God is teaching you through someone else. It's a call to make you holy. And I think that makes you die to some of those notions that you expected and wanted that no one can fill. You know what I love about this Genesis passage? So it talks about how, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they will be one flesh. I love the next verse. It says this in verse 25. The man and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. There's nothing to cover up in a real marriage. There's no apologizing for who you are. There's no pretending. And isn't that what every single one of us wants? We want someone to see us exactly for who we are, right? And then we want them still to love us for who we are and love us more as they continue to get to know us more. And so, if we all want that, the question that needs to be asked, are you willing to be that for someone else? I think therein lies a little bit of a secret to marriage. It's something that Paul writes about in the New Testament. Jeff quoted him earlier. He wrote the book of Philippians. He wrote a lot of the New Testament. And he's writing to Christians, and he says, hey, Christ followers, in marriage, wives and husbands are to submit to each other to make their marriages work. Okay, now I get it. That word submit, it's pretty volatile. And I get it that it's been used to cause great harm to women and to marriages in general. But the danger is that, we have this reaction to the abuse of the word, and then we don't really understand it all, and so we reject it completely and then miss out on the good of it. Now, that word submit occurs only a few times in the New Testament. Most notably, Paul uses it in the book of Ephesians, specifically Ephesians chapter 5. And in verse 21, he says it this way: submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Now, just remember that. That's when Paul's writing about marriage there. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Now, when directly translated from the Greek, that word submit, and I say Greek because that's what Paul wrote his letters in, just so you know that. Directly translated, submit means to place in the right order. It means to put under. And so, to submit to one another means to place yourself under, to tend to the needs of, or to be responsive to the needs of someone else, to put someone before yourself. It's placing them in the right order. And Paul says in marriage, we're to place ourselves under one another out of reverence and respect for Christ. And this reference to Jesus there for Christ, another name for Jesus, means, hey, we got to follow his example. And what did Jesus do? John, he was a disciple of Christ. He writes in a self-titled book in the New Testament these words: "For God so loved the world that he gave his only son," namely Jesus. You know, at the heart of a Christian worldview is the simple truth that people are worth dying for. Okay? That's at the heart of a relationship with God. Jesus died for us so that we could live with him. And I want to say this, young adult, if you don't know Jesus personally, man, that's the best decision you can ever make in your life. And I challenge you to just explore it, to get to know him, to say, Jesus, if you're real, if you're legit, I want to experience you, I want to understand you, I want to know you. That's the best decision you can make in your life. But that whole concept of Jesus dying for us so we could live for him, could that also be the heart of a real dynamic marriage relationship? When we give ourselves away, guys, we get something in return. And healthy relationships are those where there's this sense of mutual abandon to each other, this sense of submission, as I explained. It's the form of love which the Bible calls agape love. That's the love that John writes about in God sending his son, Jesus, agape love. Because love today is too often seen as a need or something we get from others. Agape, it's the opposite. Agape love gives. And you know, one of the biggest examples I've seen this lived out in my life is I knew this couple growing up when I was a kid. And the wife was sick the entire marriage. The entire marriage. She's still sick, okay? And so the husband would go to work and literally care for her all the other times. So he basically spent his entire married life looking after his wife. He served her, he took her to the hospital, he fed her in bed, he clothed her, he had to bathe her, he looked after the house, he did all this stuff. I used to think lots of times, man, that's a hard marriage. It's kind of a crappy marriage. Like, man, I feel sorry for this guy. He didn't really seem to have what I thought was a great marriage. But then I came to see it different. Because when someone you meet is worth dying for, when someone you love is worth the agape type of love, meaning you give all you got type of love, it's all worth it. Now ask yourself this: what if you were loved by someone who felt you were worth dying for? In other words, nothing matters more than, like that first thing I read, what someone said, finding someone who loves God more than he loves you, and who actually says in their own words, I love God so much that I want to follow his command of loving you to the point of death. I want to see you as someone worth dying for. That's agape love. And young adult, listen to me. You are worth dying for. You don't need to give yourself away for someone who won't give themselves to you. You don't actually need to use your body to get what you don't need. I want to tell you something. Sex is not about the search for something that is missing, but the expression of something that has been found. Do you hear me? It's not about the search of something that is missing. It's the expression of something that's been found. And in the Christian worldview, it's designed to be the overflow, the culmination of something that a man and a woman have found in each other. It's a celebration of two people who have committed themselves to each other, who would be willing to die for each other, who have found agape love with each other, who are married. And remember this, you are worth dying for. Your worth doesn't come from what you do, how you look, how much you produce, whether or not you're good or bad in bed, your work, your mind, whether or not you have a man or a woman. Your worth comes from your Creator. You are already loved, so much so that he died for you. Agape love has already been given to you. And so I want to say this. If you're dating someone right now, you need to ask yourself, what kind of person are they? Do they demonstrate that they're the kind of person who would die for you? Because if they don't, can I tell you this? I'm not sure you want to stay with them. And here's some ways that you can tell. Ask yourself these questions. Do they serve the world, or are they waiting to be served? Do they believe they got the short end of the stick and life owes them something? Do they see themselves as here to make the world a better place? Do they always drive the relationship towards their needs and their wants? Something good to ask yourself. And so in a moment, our panel is going to come out here. And I wanted to drop some of those truths about marriage, some of those biblical truths for you. But I want to close with these thoughts, okay? As you hear some of this, I know there's people going, well, how in the world am I going to find someone like that? Like, yeah, sure, I want that in my life. I want that in my future marriage. How do I go about it? Let me start by saying this. You will never attract someone who you are not. So don't be praying, God, bring that person into my life. Rather, I encourage you to start praying, God, help me to become that person. Simply said, you attract who you are. So you answer that question, what do you want in a spouse? Those things that, you're going to put on that list. Take those qualities and then nail them in your life. Because like attracts like. And if you start there, I actually believe you're going to be on a road to a really great marriage. And so I want to get the panel out here, but I want to pray for you guys. I know I dropped just like kind of popcorn thoughts on marriage and relationships. That was my intention here tonight. I wanted just to speak to you on that. But I want to bring the panel up because we got some great questions. But let me pray over and for you in this moment, all right? Let's pray. God, I thank you for these young adults. And I get it, at this stage of life, there's just so many questions that they're asking about future spouse and who is it and how do I get there? What does this mean in my life? And Lord, I pray first and foremost that they understand that, God, they are loved by you. That you died for them and that you have created this, relationship that they can have with you. But beyond that, I pray that you steer them rightly and perfectly in their quest for that individual in their life. I pray that as they navigate relationships and dating, may they have set priorities and things in place where they say, God, I truly want to find that individual who says you are worth dying for. But then on the flip side, may they also say, I will be that person who loves in a way that says I will die for them. May they understand the importance of that. May they understand what it means to truly agape love someone else. And so, God, as I know that's a want for so many, I pray that you steer them rightly. I pray that you give them godly men and godly women. And may they not compromise on their wants and on the things that they see as priority. And I pray that in the midst of that, you provide and you see and they see how you can bring this about in their life. And so I thank you for them. And I just pray this over them. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks so much, Joel, for that. And just kind of conclude, we thought we'd get a couple of different perspectives up here. And it's really cool because Pastor Phil was the pastor like 8 years ago or something like that now. And when I was a young adult, and so then he went on to be the lead pastor of Hope City. And then we also have his wife, Marla, and now Kennedy and Carlos, who were at the project for a long time too, worship leaders. Did you guys meet here?
Yeah, we did.
Met here? So there's hope for all of you. And it's always cool to just kind of see the history of the project, because we've been around for about 20 years, this ministry, and just the waves of people that have come through and been impacted by God through what happens here. It's always really cool to see where they go through that. So we just wanted to kind of ask a couple of questions. We've been accumulating questions that you guys have been sending in over the last little while, and just to get some practical advice on not just marriage, but leading up to marriage as well, because marriage for me is kind of like approaching a traffic circle. Like you've seen one before, but you're not exactly sure what to do once you get into it. You kind of freak out, and for me, it's like, oh, I just hope this goes really well. I'm not sure what to do. So we want to have a little bit more of those practical elements, and just even from different people's perspectives. So I wanted to start off, and maybe just if we could start off, just mention your name and. Well, Phil, you don't have to because that'd be redundant, but just kind of your name and what you do and how long you were at the project or when.
I'm Marla, and I'm a teacher, and I came to the project when Phil was the pastor at it, so that was for about 8 years.
Yeah, that was like 16 plus years ago.
Yeah.
My name's Kennedy, and I'm also a teacher. We actually teach in the same district. Not that any of you care. Anyway, I came to the project, I think it was for 10 years. I started here when I was 18, and I went until, I think I was 31 after I had Judah, so.
Yeah, my name is Carlos. I work for a charity organization called Youth Rise. And I started attending the project when I was 18. I'm 30 now, so you guys can do the math. And then met Kennedy, at the project here.
And how long have you guys been married?
6
years?
6 years.
And you two?
We're on our 23rd year.
Okay.
I came prepared for that one.
There we go.
6.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so first question, this one is just maybe a little one of the easier ones, but what is the most rewarding and what is the hardest part of marriage? Let's start with you, Carlos or Kennedy.
I think that one of the most rewarding things is that when you're married, you have somebody there witnessing your life, and you're witnessing their life. So you get to do extraordinary days together, you get to do ordinary days together, and it's kind of rewarding to be able to do that. You have someone who, if you're going through the worst of the worst, you can go through that together holding hands and have that support from them. But then, like, when Carlos has had successful days or something, we've had we've been super excited together, and that's I don't know, I just feel like that's rewarding. It's like, you're not alone in it, you know what I mean? Like, nobody wants to do life alone. I don't know.
And what would be the hardest thing? Maybe that you didn't expect until you got into marriage.
Okay. I don't know if I would categorize it the hardest, but there's times where things get tough, where maybe, communications break down, or, we have 2 kids. One is 2 and the other one's 4, and there's stress that comes with things, or financial stress, or whatever. And when things, maybe communication isn't all there, or usually me dropping the ball. I don't take the garbage out when I was supposed to, or whatever. Like, there's just, I don't know. There's stuff that makes it hard, but I think, for the most part, it's always, we find that we always find each other in that. It helps us grow our marriage, actually. That's what I wanted to say.
So let's swing it over to Phil and Marla. The next question that came in is, what are the most critical topics to discuss while dating before engagement in marriage?
I think some of the things that came to mind for me was, first of all, maybe expectations in marriage, how you view marriage, or what are you wanting out of marriage, or where you see your marriage, where you want to see a marriage go. I think life goals, are you on the same page? Because if you're not going in the same direction and you both want to go 2 different ways, that'll cause some problems. Family dynamics. Do you want to have kids? Don't you? What do you see in that type of future? And
Well, true story. We know a couple. They didn't talk about it. Guy always wanted kids. Girl didn't, and they don't have kids. And he had to die to that dream. But they didn't talk about it before marriage, right? So I don't need that mic, by the way.
You can tell I'm up here often.
Yeah.
So that, and I was just even thinking for a personal thing for us, a big deal was, where are we going to live? And, when we were dating, Phil was in Ontario, I was in Manitoba, so we kind of had to work that out. And so just those areas of life, it's, are you wanting to move? Do you want to stay here? What's your goals in that aspect? Because that affects your life as well. So just same direction. Where are you headed is a big deal.
So this next one is a little more intense, but when is it appropriate to share deep past experiences in a newer relationship, like assault, abuse, or trauma? First date, first time you meet somebody.
That's what I was going to say. Definitely first date material. Yeah.
Right out of the gate.
Yeah. I would say, that it really depends on how you see a relationship progressing, but I think that ties into the previous question that you have to talk about that before marriage. And I would also add into that your sexual past. If you have one, throw it on the table because you don't want to surprise a spouse with a past. They need to know this before. And so I would say, you got to obviously gauge, is this getting serious? Is this going somewhere? Is this going to be worth the conversation? All those things need to be brought forward. But biggest thing is you have to have worked that through in your own life. And you can't expect your boyfriend, girlfriend / spouse to be your therapy partner. It'll never work. So you have to find therapy or healing or counseling prior, or and work through it before, so that you can have the conversation in a healing type way, as opposed to, I need this person to be my therapist in this for me.
Yeah, just to add on to that, don't put a timeline to that. I think for me, when I think about, when I had to do that with Kennedy, level of trust. And there was also this realization that if I wanted this to go deeper and further in a more serious way, there had to be in fairness for her and there had to be this honesty in there, and it really felt releasing. And I just wanted to share that it was Kennedy showed grace in that moment, and it was this moment that bonded and brought our relationship even deeper. So it could be a very impactful thing.
So the next one is a big one. Should you and your significant other have a joint bank account? Why or why not?
Well, I was for many years a stay-at-home mom, working minimally. So if we didn't have a joint bank account, I'd be in trouble. But on the serious note, I think, sharing is a form of trust. And it's not, that's mine, that's yours. We're in this together. We're in this marriage together. What we own is together. Our kids are both ours. This is all of us to become one. It's all encompassing.
I know for me, it's having one with my wife. It helps to eliminate some of those 1 a.m. Amazon purchases because she's going to find out about that cat sweatshirt that I bought. It's a true story. We've talked about it. Keeps you accountable. This one's a little bit tougher. At what point is divorce a viable option?
Do you want to take it?
We entered into our relationship, and we kind of were it's not something we ever were we'll discuss it. It's something that's an option. It's not an option. We don't really have, it's never oh, what if this happened? It's not one of those, you play that what if game. That's not ever a thing. It's never a part of conversations when we have an argument or we're trying to figure something out. It's that's kind of never brought on the table. That's for us. But
Yeah, that's good counsel, Kennedy. We never say things like, I want to leave you, I'm out of here, or divorce. Those are words that are cuss words for the marriage, so to speak. You don't want to whisper that. You don't want to even shout that. The other side of it, scripturally, there are some premises for divorce. Believe it or not, the Bible talks about that. Jesus talks about that. That there are incidences in the Bible where if someone commits adultery, you can have a divorce, but the only premise that Jesus puts into that picture is you can't get married again. So that causes a little bit of a little clincher thing for us in that. The other side is if there is some really traumatic abuse, and I've counseled some couples that the best thing for you is not to be together And I know that seems anti-Christian, but if there is like mental, for sure physical, sexual, whatever type of abuse that can be there, sometimes it's healthier for the people not to be together. And so it's a case-per-case basis, but very rarely do I encourage, put divorce as an option in your life.
Right. How can you tell if something is a deal breaker or if something is just something you need to work through? And this would be more towards like dating engagement.
Sure. I think for me, like I always try to base my values on biblical truths, and I think that's where it gauges. And it's not more on my opinion; it's more on biblical truth. And so, deal breakers for me would be on that. So like whether or not they share the same faith as me is a big one, because of everything that comes after that. How I want to raise my children, how I my devotion to God and the importance of worship and church and community and all those things that like kind of fall from that. But I guess that's kind of where I would say to start if you don't know where to start. If you're single here and you don't know like how to do that, like, and you say you're living this Christian life, I think find your core and your discipline and your in biblical truths of what God says, and there you'll find the difference between just like an opinion of things and oh, he's too short as a that's a deal breaker. It's more so like there's deeper things. There's more truth in that, I guess.
So obviously there's a trend away from marriage in our society, and that's one of the questions. Actually, a good number of them came into that. So what is the big deal about living together before marriage, and isn't marriage just kind of an outdated idea?
Well, I would say, is commitment an outdated idea? Most people would say no. There's something sexy about one person for life. There's something attractive about that. And so marriage actually just makes that bond that, okay, we're going to go through with this commitment for life, and for better, for worse. That's kind of that statement. Is it an outdated idea? Well, it's been around since the beginning of time. So if you say history is outdated, I would think so. I don't think it's outdated personally. And I do feel like it's living together. I want to address all parts of that question. So living together before marriage. A lot of people say, hey, it's like test driving a car, right? Like we want to make sure that we're compatible. We want to make sure that we're great together. And I understand some of that thinking. Yet on the flip side, if you truly want to model your life towards a commitment through all things, there's something about just saying, okay, biblical pattern says we don't do that, and we're going to go into this and live our lives according to God and according to honoring God, and you figure this out as you go. There's something rich in that. In fact, stats tell us people that live together before marriage, way higher divorce rate. So it's just an interesting thing when you think about that.
I was going to say, it's like the declaration of commitment. It's saying we're in this for life. We can depend upon each other, rely on each other. We're there for each other. It encompasses so many things. And I think that the trust factor of he's always going to be there for me. He always has my back. That's such a reassuring thing that just marriage brings.
I think that what the question or the people would have that perspective as to, why would I get to know the person really well? They're trying to get rid of any surprises and have every angle covered on that. But the problem is we're not just who we are today and never changing, right? If you think that you're going to know somebody really well at 25, then nothing else is going to change through your marriage. You're totally wrong. Like I've been married for 9 years, and I'm a very different person than I was 9 years ago. And if my wife Sage would have got into that marriage thinking Jeff is going to be exactly the same in 20 years as he is today, that would be a disaster of an expectation. And so it's like Phil said, commitment isn't just to the person that you're marrying on the day you get married. Commitment is something that's consistent and keeps going. So that would be what I would throw in there as well. So we have time for one more question. It says, praying with your partner feels awkward. How do you do that?
I think you just do it. Like, don't make it complicated. If prayer is just part of your life normally, then you need to do it together because it brings you together even closer as a couple. It's a way to, I know one of those questions is talking about how do you be intimate without, being intimate. Praying together is one way to do that. Like, you're becoming spiritually connected. So why wouldn't you do it?
And should you wait until marriage to start praying with each other?
No.
It starts, I think, when you're dating. Like, as soon as you're taking a relationship seriously, which I hope you take every relationship somewhat seriously, that the goal is towards marriage and being together, that you would start praying. And I think, Kennedy, that's great because it's never going to be not awkward for some people to start, but I think once you get into the pattern of it, it brings you together and it gives you perspective and brings you together with God and aligns in that relationship between the three of you and puts you on the same page. So we have one more thing that I wanted to talk about. Pastor Phil shared a really great story with me. It doesn't have anything to do with the panel, but in closing, talking about the impact that the project can have on the community around us. And really, that's why we're here. We want to reach people that don't know Jesus in Edmonton, to reach young adults, and that's been happening for 20 years, and we know that's still happening today. But Phil, would you share that story with us? It was just so encouraging to hear today, or this week.
Yeah, it was just a cool story. I had a guy text me on Monday night, and he came to the project 14 years ago, okay? And he's like, hey, I'm in town. He lives in Portland. He's like, I'm in town. You want to connect? And I'm like, who's Mike McDonald? Like, I had to, look him up again. And I'm like, right, Mike McDonald. Okay, cool. And so he came with another guy who came to the project in that era, who I know. And it was just cool. They were sitting in my office this week, and we were just chatting and reminiscing. And I got to tell you this. So today, Mike runs the Bible Project, which is a huge online. You might see some of those videos, some of those things. If you haven't, it's on YouVersion app. They create so many videos of understanding the Bible. The other guy who was with me was Chris. He's a pastor today. And so we're chatting, and Mike came to the project because in my era, after the project, a whole bunch of us would always go to Joey's, South Common, after the service. And we would fill that place up with as many people from the project and just have a blast there. Mike was the manager of Joey's. And he told me the story this week. He says, every employee hated working Sundays because of the church people, because they were mean and didn't tip well. Except everyone fought to work Sunday night because there was this whole big group of church people that came in that were super fun, tipped well, and everyone had a blast with them. That was the project crew. And he said, I remember watching them Sunday night and going, if I ever went to a church, that's the church I want to go to. Mike didn't know Jesus at all, okay? He moved from Calgary to Edmonton to open Joey's. So he actually decided one Sunday night to come to the project. And he walked in the back doors, well, the front doors, I guess, back doors for us here. And one of the ushers saw that he was like a random dude, first time here. And this guy walked up to him and just said, hey, man, welcome to the project, first time here? And Mike's like, yeah, first time here, first time in church, actually. And so he's like, hey, so I just want you to sit at the back. You're going to experience maybe something weird. We're going to be worshiping. And he just explained the service to him. And he said these words, but I'm confident God's going to meet you tonight. That was just kind of cool. And he sat through it. Mike said it was good. It wasn't like this profound, come to Jesus moment, but it was good. And afterwards, he said, that same guy found him and said, hey, we're going to Joey's. Do you want to come with us? And he's like, I'm not going to tell these guys I run this place, okay? And so he actually went and started hanging out. Long story short, Mike came consistently to the project. The guy, the usher who introduced him to the project or talked to him about it that night became the best man at his wedding. He married someone who he met through a connection at the project. He's loving Jesus. He's doing something. And I just want to remind you, because when I was doing the project, I kept reminding young adults, a simple invite can transform someone's life. A simple invite to say, can you come to church with me on Sunday night? Or what are you doing Sunday night? Join me in church. And here I am, a decade and a bit later, sitting with these two guys who kind of came to the project. One guy was struggling with his faith. One guy didn't have any. And today they're a pastor and working on the Bible project. I'm like, God, you are awesome. Just let that encourage you, okay? Simple invite.
So I guess that is the question for you as we kind of conclude here, is be thinking, who can you invite to the project this week? Who needs to hear about Jesus? Who needs to engage with this community and have their life change? And who knows where that could go? As we go, the project doesn't end. What we do here, our church, doesn't end when we leave through those doors. We are Jesus. We are the church to our community as well. And it's not just in this space. It's when we go to a restaurant after, which I know most of us do. And so never doubt the impact that we can have on our city and the way that we can be a positive impact